Now let's try to create a situation where the REST API or the web service or the server is not available. In that case, there will be an error. We are going to implement some decent error handling in this lecture. Let's first of all create the error situation. So here with this fetch API, let me first of all give a wrong URL. So instead of users, I just say user. We are creating again a mock situation where the service or the REST API is not available. Now here if I just open the output and if I refresh and let's click on the users. So you see that it says that the users map is not a function. The reason is there is no data inside the users because the data is not being fetched. How are we going to resolve this? How are we going to handle the error? Let's try to implement. First thing is we already have the catch statement which we can define with this fetch. So let me just say catch here. I'll say dot. So the way we define dot, then we have dot catch. So here I'm going to say dot catch. Now inside catch there will be a function which will receive the error. So I give the error parameter here. And let's also give a console dot error. And I'm going to display the error. Now let's just save this and again go back to the output. Let's refresh. And again I click on users. So certainly the error is displayed in the console screen, but at the same time that the GET request for the user, right, that is 404. So the page is not found. Certainly there are other errors also related to this particular unavailability of data, but that's okay. So here we generally have the flag for the error. So I'm going to create one state saying const error flag, and I will have the set error flag, and I will say use state, and we make it false initially. Alright, now we have created this error flag and this needs to be true if we have the error. So inside this catch, instead of console, now I'm going to say set error flag to true. Now the same thing applies to the second fetch API call as well. So I'm going to just copy this and paste it here. Alright, so now we have the catch statement for both the fetch API calls, and of course we set the error flag to true. Now we need to write some coding which stops the rendering also. Here we are going to have another level of conditional rendering. In fact, we do not want to render further if there is an error. So I'm going to write here before the return, I'll say if error flag, that means if it is true, then I'm going to return an error component. Certainly I can display a message here, but we normally see that we have proper error component. So I'm going to create an error component in a moment, but let me just say error. And let's go to components and add a file, error.js. And inside this, I'm just going to say const error, return. And at the end, I'm just going to say export default error. Here, let me have a division. We'll create a class called error later on. Let's have an h1 saying 404 and an h3 saying a message, that is page not found. Let's save this and let's go back to app.js and let's also import this. So I'll say import error from the error. Let's go to app.css and we create the error class. I'll just say dot error. We give some border, 1 pixel solid, let's say blue. Let's give some background color, gray. For color, we'll set it to white. We'll keep the width 100%. And we have the text alignment set to center. Let's just save this. I'm just checking once again that we have the correct or incorrect URL. So here in the to-dos we have the correct one, and inside the users we have incorrect URL. So there we should see the error component. Let's just save this and go back to the output to check how does it behave. I'll just refresh. At the moment there is no issue. Let me click on to-dos first so we get the data. And I click here on the users. So you see that in spite of using catch, we are unable to handle the error. The reason is that the fetch API returns HTTP error codes, but does not throw the error as real error. If we were using Axios, then it would have handled this situation. So here React tries to render the user's data which is actually not there, and that's why it is giving this error that users.map is not a function. Now to handle this, we will use the response object with a status and throw an error programmatically. So let me just go to the code now. Here in the response, now I'm going to create a function. I will just cut this response.json at the moment. Now here I say if response.ok, which is a status returned by the fetch API, then inside this I will say return response.json, and the else part I'm going to say throw new error, because as I mentioned, otherwise it will not throw the error. So here I'll say throw new error, and you pass whatever message you want to. Now let's just save this and we check the output. Let's just refresh it once again. Now let's click on to-dos and we have the data. Let's click on users and it says that the page is not found. So now this is how you deal with the error handling. The important point here is that even though you put a catch with fetch API, you do take care that you have this validation and then you manually raise the error. So that's how you handle the errors with the fetch API. Alright, so now the question is, how will you handle the errors with HTTP calls and that too with fetch API? So here you must mention about it that when you write the catch, you do have to take care that in spite of writing the catch, you must make sure that you check with the response.ok, because the fetch API will get the HTTP error codes, but that is not your JavaScript error generated. So you have to generate the error like this, and this is the way you can handle the errors inside your HTTP calls with fetch API.